Good afternoon, everyone. Convening the Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. It is Thursday, April 21st, 2002 at 1:30 in conference room 325. First up on the agenda, we have SCR 24, SD1, recognizing April 17th through April 23rd, 2022 as Volunteer Week throughout the state. Volunteer Week Hawaii throughout the state. Members, we have 4 testimonies in support, written testimonies in support, none in opposition, no comments, but no one is here to testify today. So we'll move on to SCR 121, urging the counties and the state to work with, excuse me, Huamakahikina and Kumuhula to establish policies protecting hula. First up, we have DLNR, the Hawaii State Ahamoku, in opposition. Ms. Hewitt, are you there? Yep. I think that was a little surprising. She may be coming on later. I think she was in contact with my office. We'll move on for the moment. Next up, we have the Kauai Council of the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs in support. Malia Nobrega Oliveira, are you there? Okay. I do want to note we do have 108 testimonies in support and 1 in opposition for this measure. Just about everyone is just written support though. All right, we've got 1 late testifier, 2 in support. Mehana Okala Hein in support. Should be in person. Okay, anyone here to testify in person on this measure? All right, I guess there is overwhelming support for it. Next up, we have SCR 185, SD1, denouncing Russia's actions, causing a humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, and urging the United States Congress to take concrete action to support Ukrainian refugees and to increase the refugee limits for the United States and increase funding related to those efforts. We have 1 testimony in support, I'm sorry, 2 testimonies in support, 1 in opposition. The only one here is in person, Oksana Enriquez. Yep. Please come forward.
Hello, aloha. This is my first time testifying, so I'm a little nervous. I'm here, my name is Oksana Enriquez, and I'm here to testify in support of Bill SCR 185. My name is Oksana Enriquez. My maiden name is Kluchnichenko, very hard to pronounce, but my Hawaiian host family tried. I'm Ukrainian American, born and raised in Ukraine, Donbas region of Ukraine. I came to the United States as a high school exchange student. I had an honor to attend Nanakuli High and Intermediate, and I lived with Hawaiian host family in Nanakuli. My host family taught me the meaning of Malama Aina. They taught me to be grateful for privileges and opportunities we're given and importance of putting service before self. My natural family in Ukraine taught me to work hard, respect laws, take care of myself and others, and take care of less fortunate ones in time of need. My entire family and friends are in Ukraine. My father is 59 years old. He cannot leave the country, and my mother is staying by his side. My brother is supporting my little town and our local defense team with internet connection. He's a small business owner. He's the reason many people still have contact with their loved ones in my town. My niece and nephew and several females had to flee, female friends of mine had to flee to Europe. My 14-year-old Max, my nephew, he yesterday wrote a letter to US Embassy in Germany asking if he could join his aunt, me, in the United States. He's away from his father, his grandparents, and his friends, needing to get accustomed to new language, culture, and school in Germany. Numerous of my friends and host family in Hawaii and in the United States have contacted me offering their homes and their help to support my family and friends and other Ukrainians in the United States. Many keep asking every day, how can we help? I'm a volunteer. I volunteer for Ukraine. I fundraise to provide people with critical illnesses and terminal illnesses with important life-saving medications in Donbass. We find and deliver humanitarian aid. I do it all from here, from Hawaii, from my second home that I love very much. But over 11 million people had to flee Ukraine. 6 million are displaced internally. According to UN, about 5 million people are outside of Ukraine right now. Thousands, including children, illegally taken to Russian Federation from occupied areas of Ukraine. Women and children raped and murdered. Europe has done an incredible job to help and support refugees, but Europe is rather small. I'm sure you've noticed. Ukrainian refugees find ways to volunteer and work. My people are grateful for shelter and home away from home. My people want to go home, but it is unsafe. As an American, as a taxpayer, privileged and grateful for the opportunities this country has given me, I ask the American people, because it is our great people, great compassionate people who rule this country through legislators, to help Ukrainian people find temporary homes, hope and means to support themselves while this war lasts. It is 21st century tragedy to have such war crimes and atrocities, pure hate and evil, attack sovereign independent nation with good people and rich lands. What are we, the great American people, are doing to help and support those who are doing all they can to fight the injustice, cruelty, and evil that has their lands? What are we, the land of the free, are doing to support those who fight for freedom or run from the atrocities of war Russia has brought to peaceful Ukraine? Ukraine is the country that lost millions in World War II. Ukrainians fought alongside Americans, the great American soldiers, in World War II, and together brought down Nazis and freed the world from their despicable rule. Please accept this testimony, and thank you very much. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Anyone else here to testify in person?
Oh, Chair. I just want to say thank you for coming and sharing your story, and our prayers are with your family and especially the people in Donbass. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And we feel your support. We feel American support. I personally feel it. I've fundraised over $20,000 to help people with critical needs and humanitarian needs. We don't want our people to starve, so we're doing everything we can. And our people are strong and will continue fighting. And I'm grateful to my wonderful state of Hawaii that I call home. I've been here since I was 15 years old. This is my home for the amazing people and for support that this community has given me and people like me. Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Okay. Let's not, okay, seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 203, urging the Department of Land and Natural Resources to develop programs to recapture, retain, and share the cultural and environmental knowledge of Limukala. First up, we have DLNR in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Brian Nielsen representing the department on this resolution, and we stand on our written testimony in support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the Limuhui in support.
Hello, my kako. Mahalo for having me. Yes, the Limuhui and Kua'aina Uluawamo is in support of SCR 203. And we mahalo you folks for helping us to spread the Limu awareness all over Hawaii. Mahalo.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to testify on this measure in person or online? Seeing none, members, any questions? Okay, let's move on to SCR 63, SD1, HD1, requesting the Department of Education to name the new Kihei High School in honor of United States Congresswoman Patsy T. Mink. First up, we have the Stonewall Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii in support.
Good afternoon, Michael Galoyo, Chair of the Stonewall Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. We stand in strong support of this resolution. This is a long time coming and an honor most deserving of the late Congresswoman. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you. That's all the testifiers we have signed up today. Anyone else here to testify in person or online on this measure? Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to SCR 216 HD1, requesting the Department of Education to assess and report to the legislature whether and to what extent existing curriculum and training align with Aaron's Law. First up, we've got the Hawaii Pacific Health Sex Abuse Treatment Center in support. Okay, not present. I did get word that the DOE may be here. They have testified, they've submitted written testimony in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Apologize for not getting the written to you. I am Raymond Fujino. I am doing this on behalf of Interim Superintendent Keith Hayashi. The department will initiate the development of the report as outlined in the resolution and collaborate with other organizations during this process. With the ongoing work of the department, we continue to be committed to supporting students' health, well-being, and safety, and continue to address the issues highlighted by this measure. And also, we stand on our written testimony in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 76, requesting the Board of Agriculture to prohibit unapproved residential use of farm dwellings in agricultural parks. We've got one testifier today, Department of Agriculture, with comments.
I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if Chair was on. Morris Atta, Deputy for the Department. The Department will stand on its testimony, offering comments and expressing the concern that this measure may not be necessary since we already have the ability to do what the measure is requesting the board to do. Other than that, we're available for questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Members, any questions? Yep, Rep. Nakamura.
Mr. Atta, thank you for your testimony.
Yes.
So you're saying that the Department of Ag rules currently prohibit residential dwellings in ag parks?
It doesn't necessarily, well, there is a prohibition, but the way it's worded is, that there is an exception that if the Board of Agriculture allows it, it is permitted. But the default position is that they're not permitted other than with prior board consent.
Because in some areas where maybe there is water, or they can, put up a porta potty, that some people, some farmers want to be near their crops and equipment to protect from theft and vandalism. So that's why you have an exception, right?
Yes, that's primarily the reason why. Well, historically, that's been the primary reason why the requests for constructing dwellings have come up before the board. But all of our leases require, one, the board approval for that, as well as the department's approval for any of the plans from a construction and infrastructure requirement safety standpoint.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, members. Any other questions? Sorry, I've got one. Morris, how many exemptions has Department of Agriculture made for these residential dwellings?
Yeah, I have Brian Cowell standing by. He may be able to provide that statistics. I'm not sure that he can, but if anyone could, it's Brian.
If we get at least a general number.
Good afternoon, Chair. I can get that to the committee. Offhand, I don't know.
Are we talking like hundreds or dozens or?
Oh, no.
Give me a ballpark.
I would say less than 50. That would be my guess, but I can get you the exact number.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, let's move on to SCR 108, SD1, HD1, affirming Hawaii's ongoing commitment to the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement and United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and endorsement of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. First up, we've got the Hawaii Institute for Human Rights in support. Mr. Cooper, are you there? Nope. Okay. Next up, we have Stand Earth, Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty and Safe Cities in Support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Ann Pernick, and I'm with the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty and Safe Cities teams at Stand Earth. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As part of the team behind the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative, I want to offer thanks to those who have offered their agencies, and their organization support for the resolution, SCR 108, SD1, HD1, as well as to Senator Rhodes and the legislature for your leadership in supporting it. The voice of Hawaii is critical in the global effort for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty because of your leadership in calling for a just transition to clean energy as part of your climate emergency declaration, because of your unwavering support for the Paris Climate Agreement and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty complements, because of Hawaii's exceptional natural beauty and vulnerability to climate change, and because of your leaders' dedication to resilience and renewable energy in the face of mounting impacts from fossil fuels. What the Hawaii State Legislature says in support of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty will be heard around the world. With appreciation to you and all those who have supported this resolution, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Peter Greenhill, an individual in support.
Aloha, everyone, chairs, vice chairs, members of the committees. Before I begin, first of all, I want to apologize to Representative Matayoshi because when I submitted my written testimony, there was a typo. I left off a T at the end of your first name, and I'm a bit ashamed of that, so please forgive me for that. My name is Peter Greenhill, recently retired director of the Iolani Peace Institute, a position I served in for 17 years. Currently, I work with the International Network Group of the Fossil Fuel Treaty, together with Ann Pernick, from whom you just heard, and I'm giving testimony on SCR 108, specifically with regard to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. Recent IPCC reports, United Nations speeches, and scientific announcements worldwide have made it very clear that planetary environmental problems are more critical than ever, and that the biggest step humanity must take, the single biggest step, is to stop producing and consuming fossil fuels. The need to address these problems is even more immediate for Pacific islands like ours. Endorsing the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty that urges us to end fossil fuel extraction, production, and usage would be totally consistent with steps that the state of Hawaii has already taken. Our state has already shown its understanding of the necessity to transition to clean energy. And the treaty is also consistent with our belief here in Malama Aina and Malama Honua. Endorsing the treaty will send a strong message to our people and to other states in the country, and it will lead to additional concrete action to help alleviate both environmental problems and injustice. I strongly and respectfully exhort you to pass this resolution. Becoming the first US state to endorse or urge the endorsement of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty would be a significant call to action. In fact, the call could be considered a clarion call, loud, strong, and clear, calling out to our people and the other 49 US states in a way that says, follow us. We can't wait any longer while an industry that Bill McKibben, the scientist, has called a rogue industry, namely the fossil fuel industry. We can't wait any longer while they hold us, our country, and the rest of the world hostage, destroying all living things and living systems. Thank you again very much for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you. And we have Joshua Cooper from the Hawaii Institute for Human Rights back on. So Joshua, if you're there, you can proceed with your testimony.
Aloha, thank you so much, Chair. It's an honor to be here. I'm Joshua Cooper, and I'm a lecturer at the University of Hawaii and the Executive Director of the Hawaii Institute for Human Rights. I agree with Ann's testimony as well as Peter's, and I actually just had a television show this morning with Ukrainian activists who were very much pointing out that on this Earth Day, as we're looking at that, the most important thing we could do to stand in solidarity is to reduce fossil fuel consumption and move to renewable clean energy. We believe this important resolution is a step forward. It is an illuminating light to be able to inspire other states across the US to see that this is the way forward to protect our planet. When speaking this morning with the activists in Ukraine, they did point out, of course, as we're looking at all the situations, that if we want a renewable energy path and we pursue that, we can actually then really tell the dictators, the oligarchs, all the different people making all the bad decisions, this is the way to go. And the sad part is, today it's Putin, but we know when we look at the sad situation, once people were looking for more oil, they're going to Saudi Arabia, who had just beheaded a handful of people and committed even murder of journalists such as Khashoggi. So we really believe, more importantly, Hawaii has the opportunity to lead by example, because we can be that hub for renewable energy. We have solar, we have wind, and the good news is the solar prices have not gone up at all since the conflict started in the Ukraine 2 months ago. And we know, more importantly, people come to Hawaii to be inspired by our beauty, but they can also come to Hawaii in the future and see renewable energy in action. And we could be this hub for regenerative agriculture and many other ways. But it begins with this important resolution focusing on fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, because it does address something that we've already done a great job at doing. We've done an amazing job with the 2030 agenda, focusing on the 17 global goals here in Hawaii. But we've also done a great job on the Paris Agreement. But we know at Glasgow, we couldn't get the language we needed, that strong enough language to address fossil fuels. And this allows us to address that puka in the global agreement and make sure that Hawaii is leading the way. Mahalo, thank you so much for making time and allowing me to participate this way virtually.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Last up, we've got Tyler Levine, an individual in support.
Good afternoon, chairs, vice chairs, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of SCR 108. My name is Tyler Levine, and I am a homeschooled student currently residing on the island of Oahu. I'm here today to look you all in the eye and tell you, my brothers and sisters, all mothered by one earth, that for the 17 years I have been on this planet, I have watched the promise for the future fade into the smog-like haze of society's economic maze. Now across the globe, ecosystems are dying. Temperatures are rising and species are being driven to the brink of extinction. Right before our eyes, the world is changing in unimaginable ways, never witnessed before, posing an existential threat to life on Earth. Climate change has in fact been declared a code red for humanity. This means it's time to put the people and the planet before pay. Yet every day, business as usual continues. The good news is that our story has not yet ended. The future has not yet disappeared. For I believe there is still more hope than there is fear. But to quote the Onceler from the children's book, The Lorax, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's just not. So, to conclude, in order to rewrite the history of our future, radical action is required through international cooperation to ensure the non-proliferation of fossil fuels. And I believe that this begins right here with this resolution endorsing this treaty. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? If not, members, any questions? Okay, if not, let's move on to SCR 133 ST1, urging the State Commission on the Status of Women to establish a task force to develop and implement an outreach program aimed at informing domestic violence victims of available sources of assistance. Members, we have 8 testimonies in support, none in opposition, no comments, but no one is actually here to testify today. Anyone here to testify today in person or online that's not on my list? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to SCR 25 SD1, recognizing October 3rd through October 7th, 2022 as Digital Inclusion Week in the state of Hawaii. We've got one testifier here today, the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Bert Lum. I'm the Broadband Strategy Officer here in DBED, and I stand on our written testimony in support of this resolution and am available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone here to testify on this? Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none. Members, any questions? All right, seeing none, let's move on to SCR 138 SD1 HD1, urging the City and County of Honolulu to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the Lanikai Bikeway and recognize the efforts of Ted Rogers and Cynthia Thielen, who led the efforts to establish it. We have one testifier in support, but no one here. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 201, strongly urging the United States Army Corps of Engineers to work with the Department of Land and Natural Resources to mitigate negative impacts to corals and other important coral reef resources while dredging in state waters. First up, we have DLNR in support.
Aloha, Chair, Brian Nielsen, representing the department on this resolution. We stand on our written testimony in support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's all the testifiers we have today. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, any questions? Okay, let's move on to SCR 161 SD1 HD1, requesting the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation to convene a task force to review the permitting process related to affordable housing and to conduct a study of the effect of county ordinances on housing, finance, and development. First up, we have a DHHL in support. Are you here to testify on this measure? 161. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, I skipped one. 161, we actually have no one here signed up to testify. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Okay. Apologies. Let's move on to SCR 46 SD1, requesting the Department of Hawaiian Homelands to conduct a feasibility study on the creation of an enforcement division for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. First up, DHHL in support.
Aloha.
Nope. Not quite yet. Mr. Isla, could you come to the podium so the Zoom guys can hear you too?
I was in the area, so I stopped by.
Yeah, appreciate it.
We support SCR 46 SD1. There are some commission members who feel very strongly that in addition to supporting the coordination of the Sheriff's Department and the new entity that would be developed, they still want to pursue at least a feasibility study to see what would it take and what would be the impacts of creating our own enforcement within DHHL. So stand in strong support. Thank you.
Good, thank you. No other testifiers here. Anyone else here to testify on this measure in person or online? Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the last measure of the day, SCR 192 SD1, requesting the Office of Information Practices to convene a working group to develop recommendations for the treatment of deliberative and pre-decisional agency records. First up, we have DLNR in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members. Pua IU on behalf of the department will stand on our testimony in support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the Department of Transportation in support.
Vice Chair Matayoshi, Chair Nakashima, honorable members of the Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs, the DOT would like to stand on our written testimony in support of the measure. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And we also have the Office of Information Practices here in support.
Thank you for hearing this resolution, concurrent resolution. Cheryl Kakazu Park for OIP. We support this measure, would be happy to do the work during the interim to convene the working group and hope to hear from a lot of people during that time. I'll be here to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's all the testifiers I have signed up today. Anyone else here to testify in this measure? If not, members, any questions?
I have a question.
Yep, Rep. Nakamura.
This is for OIP. Thank you for your testimony. Wanted to ask, do you feel that there should be other stakeholders included in the working group, or do you want to keep it to government and entities?
No, I think we're going to have public interest groups, the League, Common Cause, and Civil Beat Law Center have expressed interest in serving on the working group. So we hope to have a small enough working group to be manageable, but we will hear from everybody. We hope to hear from a lot of people during the interim.
Thank you very much. That guidance will be really helpful.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll recess for decision making. Recess. Okay, reconvening the Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. It is still Thursday, April 21st, 2002. It is 2:07 p.m. in conference room 325. Okay, first up, we've got SCR 24 SD1 recognizing April 17th through April 23rd, 2002 as Volunteer Week throughout the state of Hawaii. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this one as is. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair, as is.
SCR 24 SD1 recommendation is to pass unamended, knowing the excused absences of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Are there any no's? Any reservations? Which is carried.
Okay, thank you, members. Next up, we have SCR 121 urging the counties and the state to work with Hua Makahikina and Kumuhula to establish policies protecting hula. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair with a vote.
SCR 124 motion is to pass unamended, knowing the excused absences of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Any reservations? Any no's? Motion is carried.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to SCR 185 SD1, denouncing Russia's actions causing a humanitarian crisis in Ukraine and urging the United States Congress to take concrete action to support Ukrainian refugees and to increase the refugee limits for the United States and increase funding related to those efforts. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair, as is.
SCR 185, SD1, recommendation is to pass unamended, noting excused absences of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Motions are carried.
Okay, thank you. Next up, SCR 203, urging the Department of Land and Natural Resources to develop programs to recapture, retain, and share the cultural and environmental knowledge of Limu Kala. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this one as is. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Chair.
SCR 203, recommendation is to pass unamended, noting the excused absence of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Motion is carried.
Okay, next up, we have SCR 63 SD1 HD1 requesting the Department of Education to name the new Kihei High School in honor of United States Congresswoman Patsy T. Mink. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair with the vote.
SCR 63 SD1 HD1, recommendation is to pass unamended, during the excused absences of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Any reservations? Any noes? Motion is carried.
Thank you. Next up, we have SCR 216 HD1 requesting the Department of Education to assess and report to the legislature whether and to what extent existing curriculum and training align with Aaron's Law. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair, as is.
SCR 216 HD1, recommendations passed unamended, noting the excused absences of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Any reservations? Any noes? Motion is carried.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have SCR 76 requesting the Board of Agriculture to prohibit unapproved residential use of farm dwellings in agricultural parks. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this one as is. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair, as is.
SCR 76, motions passed unamended. Noting the excused absence of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Any noes? Any reservations? Motion is carried.
Okay, next up, we have SCR 108 SD1 HD1 affirming Hawaii's ongoing commitment to the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement and United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and endorsement of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this one as is. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair, as is.
SCR 108 SD1 HD1, recommendation is to pass unamended, during the excused absence of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Any reservations? Any noes? Motion is carried.
Yeah, thank you, members. Next up, we have SCR 133 SD1 urging the State Commission on the Status of Women to establish a task force to develop and implement an outreach program aimed at informing domestic violence victims of available sources of assistance. Chair's recommendation is to amend this to the language in the companion resolution SCR 122 HD1 version. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair, as amended.
SCR 133 SD1, recommendations passed with amendments, knowing the excused absence of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Any reservations? Any noes? Motion is carried.
Thank you. Next up, we have SCR 25 SD1 recognizing October 3 through October 7, 2022 as Digital Inclusion Week in the state of Hawaii. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this one as is. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Chair, as is.
SCR 25 SD1, recommendation is to pass unamended, knowing the excused absence of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Any reservations? Any noes? Motion is carried.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have SCR 138 SD1 HD1 urging the city and county of Honolulu to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the Lanikai Bikeway and recognize the efforts of Ted Rogers and Cynthia Thielen, who led the efforts to establish it. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Chair, as is.
SCR 138 SD1 HD1 recommendation is to pass unamended, knowing excused absences of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Any reservations? Any no's? Motion is carried.
Okay, thank you, members. Next up, we have SCR 201, strongly urging the United States Army Corps of Engineers to work with the Department of Land and Natural Resources to mitigate negative impacts to coral and other important coral reef resources while dredging in state waters. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair, as is.
SCR 201, recommendation is to pass unamended, knowing the excused absence of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Any reservations? Any no's? Motion is carried.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have SCR 161 SD1 HD1 requesting the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation to convene a task force to review the permitting process related to affordable housing and to conduct a study of the effect of community ordinances on housing, finance, and development. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this one as is. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Chair, as is.
SCR 161 SD1 HD1 recommendations passed unamended, knowing the excused absence of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Any reservations? Any no's? Motion is carried.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have SCR 46 SD1 requesting the Department of Hawaiian Homelands to conduct a feasibility study on the creation of an enforcement division for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Chair, as is.
SCR 46 SD1 recommendations to pass unamended, no excuse absences of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Any reservations? Any no's? Motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Last up, we have SCR 192 SD1 requesting the Office of Information Practices to convene a working group to develop recommendations for the treatment of deliberative and pre-decisional agency records. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair, as is.
SCR 192 SD1 recommendations passed unamended. No excuse absence of Representative Kobayashi, McKelvey, and Ward. Any reservations? Any no's? Motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. We are adjourned.